Miss Jody here with another video for our health class. We are still on chapter 6. It never ends. So much information in this chapter, mainly because it's going over all of the infectious disease world that we spent a lot of time on, and then now the non-infectious diseases, and so there's a lot of topics. So do note with my videos here, we're continuing on trying to get our notes done so that when we get back together, hopefully, if this ever ends, that we can do some of our experiments and stuff like that that we need to do for our books and have all this out of the way. I have gotten a little fancy here. If you've noticed on all the videos, each week I have a different background. The first week was purple, then I went to yellow, and then I went to dark green, now I'm to light green. This is just helping me keep track of how many weeks we've been separated. It's terrible. But anyway, so we'll see how many sheets of colored paper this ends up being, but hopefully not much longer. Hopefully we can get together in May and do some stuff. Worst comes to worst, early June. That'd be terrible, but all right, so we are continuing on with our non-infectious diseases and looking at the systemic diseases that are affecting more of like the whole system, and we're looking at it as a whole. Okay, so hemopathy. So we're looking at a pathological state of the blood or blood-forming tissue. So anytime we talk about pathology, that's always, just think of it that way, the path of the diseases, trying to figure out what is causing. And if you remember when we first started this, a disease or disorder, it's any, a disease is anything that is upsetting the normal structure or function of the system or the organ or whatever. And so it's something gone wrong. And so if we have something with the blood that's not working quite right, or blood forming tissue. So again, with each one of these diseases, or categories, they just give us a few. There's a lot more, but thankfully they only give us a few to go over. So that way we can just skim the topic, and then when we go in more detail, if you take more of a advanced class, with either when we're on infectious disease epidemiology, or as a course on pathology and more in-depth versions of what we're talking about. But this just being high school health, well, we're getting some of the topics. All right, so problems with the blood or blood-forming tissue. Anemia, you've heard of anemia, very well-known situation. Any condition in which a shortage of red blood cells or hemoglobin, the protein that makes the blood cells the red color, exists in the blood. So if you have any shortage, so if you are anemic, and I myself am anemic, if you look at the regular, what we would normally say if we split the blood, I could have drawn this and didn't think of it till now, but not split the blood, separate the blood. So if we create a tube and we take out the blood and then we put it in the centrifuge where it will spin it. You've seen that before, where it spins the little blood test tubes, and then it, by density, the blood layers itself. You'll have a certain amount at the bottom, which will be called the erythrocytes, and they'll be red. And then you'll have the little tiny amount, which some people call the buffy coat, and that's where like the white blood cells and kind of it's called buffy coat because of the tan color of it. But I always tell when I'm teaching younger students, I always say buffy, just think of how someone being really buff and strong, and they're like gonna fight off the bad guys. Well, that's what we find in that little layer, the buffy coat, along with some other I think dissolved things. And then in this layer, maybe I'll put this about right here, would be the plasma, which would have like the watery type base to it. And I'm going to grab my colored pencils here. I took them off my table here, and then that way I can use them to make some color to that. I'll get back on my table here. Moved my little recording station over by the window to get a little more light, and I'm disoriented because it's opposite side of the picnic table and everything. But anyways, let me get this here. So I'm going to just make this. I'll make that the plasma. I'll make this the oh, that was not a red. Oh, wait, it is a red. It looks very orange, but I guess it's a red, okay? This will be, and this is not to scale. This is terrible. And then that little tan one, let's see if I can get like a little tan crayon here, something like that. That'll work for now. Okay, so let's say it's something like that. So normally you'd have a percentage of like about how much plasma, and I'm just doing some round offs, and about how much erythrocytes, the red blood cells. And so let's just say approximately, the plasma would be approximately about 55%. And then the erythrocytes would be about 45%, on average. And then this little buffy coat would be less than 1%. Okay. And so your blood would have, a nice, amount on average of these, the plasma, the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, and the buffy coat. Now, when it comes to anemia, what happens is there's a shortage. It's a different numbers here. So you might have a smaller amount, not 45% of the erythrocytes, a certain amount of percent. I forget exactly the cutoff when you become anemic, but you wouldn't have as much as this, but then you'd have more maybe of the plasma and whatever, but you wouldn't have the right amount or the more even amount with the erythrocytes. Now, the reason this is important, and boy, this is terrible drawing. Look, this is only 10% more, and it's like huge compared to that, but whatever. But when you don't have as many of the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, then you're going to have problems, because what happens is the red blood cells are filled with an iron-containing protein called hemoglobin. And you've heard of hemoglobin before. And this is what allows the attachment for the oxygen to attach to the red blood cells so that it can be carried to the rest of the cells in the body. And then, of course, there's also the process of waste removal, carbon dioxide, and that type of removal system. So bringing oxygen in and then bringing the carbon dioxide out. Each one of those things have certain parts that are necessary for those processes to take place. And so if you don't have what you really need, like in this instance, to get the oxygen to your cells, you're going to be in trouble. So if these little guys are the carriers of the oxygen and you only have a small amount and not the regular amount, you're not going to be living your best life, I guess we'd say. Okay, so you don't have the right amount of the red blood cells. So that particular protein allows the blood to transport oxygen. So decreases the ability, if you don't have the right amount, it decreases the ability of the blood to carry needed oxygen to cells. And so it's problematic, right, if you're anemic. Now, what are some reasons why you could be anemic? Well, the most common is iron deficiency. So this is why if you're anemic, a lot of times they want you to have iron, or like me in specific, I have trouble with iron, like in tablets and that sort of thing. So my body has to get it from, just food and such. So there's a lot of times that like I'll crave tuna all the time. I just want to eat tuna, or just weird, like V8s. Like some people can't stand to drink V8s. I could just pound a V8 like every day. In fact, if I start having headaches or something, instead of headache medicine, I just drink a V8 because it's like my body needs that and I crave that. So iron deficiency is the most common. 1 in 5 women, now women have this problem more specifically in the iron deficiency, and 1 in 5 women have this problem. So it's pretty common. You could also have anemia with deficiency of folic acid, copper, B12. So again, when we were studying, for those of you that are in the history of medicine also, we were studying the nutritional diseases, nutritional deficiency diseases, and the lack of certain nutrients. And remember us learning the difference between the vitamin and the mineral, which we'd already learned in AP biology, but just how important these things are to our bodies as a whole. So if you have a deficiency in those areas, or if you have chronic bleeding, if you're somebody who's a bleeder from like a peptic ulcer or something like that, you may have trouble with anemia. Or abnormal destruction of red blood cells. So if there's a problem with your blood cells and where they're being abnormally destructed, or sickle cell anemia. And you've heard of that before, where the blood cells are shaped funny, like sort of like in a sickle. That's why they're called sickle cell. I'm trying to think of what it's like, a boomerang type shape. And this is a genetic trait, and people with sickle cell anemia have a lot of problems with this. And then hemophilia. So this is a disease, again, we're in the blood world, a disease in which the blood cell does not clot, or it clots very slowly. And this is caused by a hereditary defect in a blood protein involved in the formation of blood cells. So something in the process of the formation of the blood cells. And it affects mostly males in higher quantities. And it did say in the book that if you have this problem, they can actually put plasma in the inject plasma in as a therapeutic use of someone like blood plasma that has the ability for clotting, where the protein isn't messed up, and then that can help you with clotting. So there's some methods, and so both of these are methods that are problems that we have a lot of knowledge on and can work with. Now, notice that I finally went back and remember I had started this chapter and I put the labels, systemic diseases and disorders, and then we just went through one after another, and I was thinking I should have put labels on each one of these because there was so many of them I couldn't take it anymore, that it wasn't organized well enough. So I did go back, and like for cardiovascular diseases, I put the label on when we're studying cardiovascular diseases. The diseases of the skin, and then the diseases of the endocrine system and glands, and I put those. Hopefully you've been doing your little journal sheets. Gastrointestinal diseases and disorders, and then I did the I actually did them out of the wrong one. This one I forgot this one, so it's why it's not in order, but this was supposed to be the next one, and then we were supposed to go on to the next let's see, 3 more. So that was the disorders with pathological state of the blood or blood forming tissue. And then we have hepatopathy. I think that was the next one. Yeah, because I had them out of order. So hepatopathy. So this is a problem with the liver. Okay, so with the liver, we have abnormal or diseased state of the liver. And if you remember from AP biology, how much we talked about the way the liver was this master chemist, this master organ that was involved in so many things. And our health book reaffirms that. Scientists have identified over 500 functions of the liver, making it perhaps the most versatile organ in the body. And so the liver is not something you want to mess around with. And so we know that it is a chemical factory. It converts glucose to glycogen and stores it. We talked about that process in AP biology. It helps maintain the level of glucose in the blood, and we talked about that particularly when we talked about the diseases of the endocrine system and looking at diabetes mellitus. Okay, so very important. It removes worn out red blood cells. Now we usually think of that just as the spleen, but we do know that the liver is involved in a lot of these things, very master organ here. Breaks down metabolic waste, unused hormones, medicines, drugs, and environmental toxins. So this thing is working for you, and so you don't want to mess it up. Also stores nutrients, vitamin A, D, E, K, B12, and minerals such as iron and some of the other small micronutrients that we need. Now, when you're messing around with the liver, one of the main ones that always come up is the hepatitis world. So the hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver. And so there's different forms. You heard about hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and I'll be sending you a video to go along with this lesson so that you can get a more understanding between the different types of hepatitis. But as a whole, it's an infection of the liver. It's a result of an infection by a virus or viruses, or other pathogens. So there's going to be more than one thing that's going to be causing this hepatitis side of things. So this is why I put in parentheses Hep A, B, and C, so that you would know. I'd be giving you a video on that. Also, not just the virus in the pathogenic world, but exposure to excessive amounts of certain chemicals. And you've heard of this before, and it makes sense. If you're putting a bunch of chemicals, and you've heard of things like alcohol really causing, there's alcoholic hepatitis, and so alcoholic inflammation of the liver, and there's drugs related to inflammation of the liver. You're having excessive amounts of these certain chemicals in your body, and so therefore you're just poisoning yourself, and you're saying, oh, let's keep adding it to my body so that my liver can keep having to break it down and try to keep me alive. Oh joy. And so this is why I'm really big against the high alcohol consumption and drugs, because it's not that necessarily if someone drinks an alcoholic beverage or something like that that I feel like it's, you know, terrible and whatever. It's just every now and then, like if somebody has a glass of wine or something like that, I don't think as much like this in my mind. But even if I would drink something alcoholic like a glass of wine, as a science-minded person, I always think to myself, I am poisoning myself. For what reason? Why? It doesn't even make me feel happy. I don't know why. But some people who like to drink, if they drink excessively, then it's constantly having to clear itself of these toxins coming in. So you have to keep that in mind in the world of drinking. And like I said, excessive. I don't want someone to freak out just because I, said that alcohol, is maybe problematic to your liver. It could be. It doesn't mean just if you have a glass of wine or something, but if you're having a lifestyle of constantly bringing those toxins into your system, then you could be causing some trouble to your liver, alcohol and drugs. The constant problem with the liver can create cirrhosis of the liver, which is chronic damage from a variety of causes, leading to scarring and liver failure. And so sometimes if someone is an alcoholic for a long time in their life, many years of bringing these toxins in, they will literally end up having scarring in their liver and it can lead to liver failure. And it's very problematic. And so you don't realize that when you're allowing those substances to be put into your body and making your body continually filter them out. Okay, so that's some abnormal and disease states of the liver. And then we have the immunodeficiency in lymphatic diseases, okay? And again, each one of these are just a little summary, and then that's just getting us through these diseases, and you can look into more in depth to any of them that are interesting to you. So immune deficiency. So what are they? Certain conditions can cause a person's immune system to fail, and therefore then the person will become vulnerable to infections. And we know when we looked at the lymphatic system how amazing it is, all of the intricate parts, and how it's like we're this robust like military zone inside our body to make sure anything that does get in will be defeated for the most part. And remember when we first started this chapter and we were looking at infectious diseases, and we were talking about from on a daily basis, each day you breathe in 1 to 10 million disease-causing organisms, possible disease-causing organisms. So that's I shouldn't say organism because viruses aren't organisms, or agents, whatever, disease-causing, have the ability to cause you trouble. And yet we only get sick a couple times a year. So that's how amazing the immune system is. So the problem is what happens when the immune system goes bad, and there's some problems with it. So how could you have some immune deficiencies? Well, large amounts of radiation. So if you're involved in a large amounts of radiation, then you become immune deficient. Certain drugs or other chemicals that you have can create an immune deficiency. And you see that a lot when people are going through chemotherapy radiation therapy, then for cancer, then they become immunocompromised. And certain drugs like chemotherapy, then they become immunocompromised because it kills off some of the good guys that are trying to fight for us. But they're doing that because they're trying to stop the cancer, obviously. All right, results. It can also be a result of hereditary genetics, genetic diseases that prevent the body's leukocytes from working properly. So this can be a genetic situation that you were born with, a immunodeficiency. All right, so one of the most popular ones that are most well-known ones, actually these two are actually both well-known, AIDS, the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and it's linked back to 1981 when they started realizing that there was something new on the horizon for people who were struggling with this, dying from simple things like yeast infections and common colds. And what we found out is that it is caused by, this is the disease, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. It's caused by the virus, human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. And we know now that it's a slow-acting virus that infects certain white blood cells and hinders their ability to fight infections. So when we're talking about viruses and we're talking about the lytic cycle or the lysogenic cycle, the cycle where it hides in your cells, and then as more cells are divided and new cells are created, then it keeps creating the little viral DNA in there. And so it's hiding out in your cells as they are making more cells. And then eventually it will go into the lytic cycle, will bust out and then start taking over. And so this obviously is a big problem. And we've had a lot of research in the AIDS world. And so we're doing better. Now there's some countries like Africa and other countries that don't have as much intense education and government help and those sorts of things that still have a lot of trouble with HIV and AIDS. Mononucleosis, a disease that is caused by a virus that infects B lymphocytes. And we remember the lymphocytes; those are the in the lymph side, the B cells, the salivary glands, sometimes the spleen, and other lymph organs. So with mononucleosis, you've heard of people sometimes just say mono. So it's going to be infecting your B lymphocytes, your salivary glands, sometimes your spleen, other lymph organs in that lymphatic system. The most common virus that causes the Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, but there are other viruses that can also cause mononucleosis. But this is just one of the most common ones, so that's why I wrote that one down. And usually you get this when you're younger as a child and into young adults, and a lot of times it's real prevalent in college-age students. But there are times you can get it as an adult. And the older you get, like as an adult, like from college age to adult, it lasts longer and it's harder to combat. So it's better if you get it as a child, as a children or young adult, because you're able to kick it faster. Fever, headache, sore throat, weak, tired. Sometimes they lose weight. And so this can go on for months, especially if you're older. Sometimes it could be a week, it can be months. You never know how long it takes. I know one friend of mine's mother has been struggling with Epstein-Barr for a year, and she's older, and it's just she's never been the same, and so it's a struggle when the older you get. All right, so we had the liver, we had the blood, we had the liver problems, we have the immune deficiency problems, and then this one, see, I did it out of order, musculoskeletal diseases, and that's our last one for today. So musculoskeletal diseases, MSDs. So this is injuries or disorders that affect the human body's movement system, which is what? The muscular and the skeletal. So we have two big ones that people are familiar with, arthritis. And so arthritis is a condition in which the joints become inflamed and make movement painful. Osteoarthritis, you've heard of that before. This is one underneath the arthritis category. Wearing out of the articular cartilage that cushions the joint surfaces. So imagine the little joint surfaces and then not having that little cushion cartilage. That's very painful. And as people age, a lot of times they have this struggle. In osteoarthritis, you've heard it before. Rheumatoid arthritis, this is similar in the sense that it's when the joints become inflamed and it's hard to move. But this one is more when the body is actually attacking its own self. So it occurs when the body's immune system repeatedly attacks the tissues of a joint, damaging the articular cartilage. This causes the joint to become inflamed and painful. So whenever the body is the one doing, our own body's attacking our own tissues, that's what we call the autoimmune diseases. And this particular rheumatoid arthritis is classified as an autoimmune disease. Okay, how do they say this? Bursitis, I think they say bursitis. Okay, when a bursa becomes swollen or inflamed. So what's a bursa or bursae? It's a small fluid-filled cushion that prevents muscles and tendons from rubbing directly against each other or against bones. So whenever this little bag of cushiony fluid stuff, when it becomes swollen or inflamed, then it's problematic with your movement. And I have this problem with what they call tennis elbow from being a runner. When I hold my arms bent like that all the time for long distances, and then in the evenings my elbows ache where the soft squishy part is, not the hard part of the elbow, but on the sides, and I have to sit there and just squeeze and rub it because it's swollen and there's a lot of inflammation and it's painful. Okay, so these two are just some starter ones. Now again, like I said, every one of these categories have so many different problems, things that can go wrong, but we're just getting an introduction to each one. Okay, so that's a few for today. I just want to do a little one page on each one of those so we can kind of get through this chapter. And we still have like two more. We have those three more. Diseases of the nervous system, the respiratory system, and then what? Oh, and the urology. Okay, so like kidneys and all that kind of stuff. So we got three more to get through, and I'll do those, and then we have one little part of chapter 6, which is sort of a summary of our, making sure we're taking good steps for our own personal health care, and then we finally get on to chapter 7. Okay, so hopefully things are going well, and I'll see you next time.